Return to the past. Well, if it would be of your interest, I published a full book in 2023 on rent control and many other measures provided for in the Spanish Housing Act 2023. It was the first housing act in Spain since our democracy period, but probably the measures provided in the act are not the proper one according to our problems. So the contents of this presentation would be, first of all, the Spanish housing crisis relevant data. So we are going to map the problem. In Spain, we have a lot of problems, as you know, and even the international media has put the light on that. So we are going to set it in context. Second, we are going to compare the current measures of the Spanish Housing Act with respect to the former Urbanist Act of 1964, which is in force still just for urbanist contracts concluded before 1985. So, and as many speakers mentioned before, there are certain biases with respect to the rest of the rental market, with respect to the measures provided for in the former Urban Leases Act of 1964. And the last part would be referred to the two rulings of the Spanish Constitutional Court with respect to the Spanish Housing Act. Probably the second one is the most important, and some concluding remarks with respect to the of what we are in the current state. At the end of the previous presentation, some people asked, sorry, I didn't remember the names, but the responsible of certain social housing organisms mentioned that probably there are not a correlation or, well, in fact, it seems like that because Professor Nazarre informed to the Spanish Parliament in this regard in October 2024. So yes, there are a correlation on every act that in the regional parliaments or in the Spanish Parliament are enforced. Well, there are a correlation directly of each act that they decide to approve, and maybe Professor Nazarre then could go on that. So we are going to map the problems. We have a lot of problems. The first problem that I'm going to refer to is the unlawful tourist accommodation that we are using in Spain as a way to escape from this problematic regulation. First of all, I would like to mention that in Spain, not all are problems, because in Spain, sorry, is the first state across European Union that has adopted government in terms of regulation in terms of controlling tourism accommodation. If you are interested here, I have a paper that I published on this topic because the Spanish Land Registrar Association instructed me to do that, analyzing how and if it's appropriate or not according to the EU regulation on this field. So some landlords, some homeowners decided to use unlawful tourist accommodation, and probably this land register system of providing for a particular code just to rent that accommodation. This system would solve this problem, but in fact, we have 32,000 dwellings rented as this unlawful modality. So, but why? Because the current regulation is not appropriate. What happened? It's not appropriate to this field.
Okay.
The increasing of this unlocked accommodation is around 21%. So this is another objective data in this regard. So the Catalan effects of rent control, the most appropriate study. If you want, you can take a picture to the presentation for sure. If you want to read deeply, there are the most updated and deep study on rent control effects in Catalonia. They did Professors García Monsalvo and Joan Bonras, both are professors of economics at the Pompeu Fabra University. You know that is one of the top universities in Spain. So, and they published the first study on rent control effects in Catalonia in 2023, and the updating of that study, but with the current application of rent control after the approval of the Spanish Housing Act in 2023. It's completely an open source. You can check. So if you look at the proper title, you will find it. Which are the results of that study? The first one, rent decrease, 5%. Yeah, we know that this is the first effect, but in the opposite side, we have housing supply decrease of 10%, then the rent decrease in luxury homes. This is not a voluntary effect, but it happens to in all places where rent control has been applied, and rent increase in homes out of zoning areas. So we have also a problem in zoning. Zoning is not because in Spain we need first the zoning area and then the rent control measures in that area. So probably there are a problem with that in identifying the proper areas where rent control should be applied. Another problems, so because we are going to mapping the problems in Spain with respect to not only to rent control, but also to the rest of measures that are provided for in the Spanish Housing Act. The first one, housing supply decrease, is around 36%. Many people before mentions that around 200,000 of dwellings has completely disappeared of the rental market. In fact, 3 million dwellings, according to the Spanish the Spanish housing, the Association of Housing Agents, Federación Nacional de Ejecuciones Inmobiliarias. According to that, 3 million homes has completely disappeared. Apart from that, the rent increase is around 9.5%, and large homeowners, which is the obsession, because it's not reality, it's an obsession of the state legislator and also certain regional legislators in this regard. The problem with that is that are not the most part of landlords in Spain. So less than 5% of landlords in Spain are considered as large homeowners. These are referred to 98,000 dwellings. So are not the most part of landlords. So they are making a problem or giving certain part of their responsibility in that problem to operators, to counterparties that they haven't caused that problem. Lastly, the last problem that I would
Cristina,
like, sorry.
Very short clarification. How are large homeowners defined?
Large homeowners, the consideration according to the Spanish Housing Act, so it's not in the Spanish Urbanism Act, it's in the Spanish Housing Act. It's considered generally referring to 10 dwellings and just, but one moment because it needs a little bit of explanation. So the general rule is 10 dwellings for one owner, but any region in Spain, for the time being just Catalonia, but we are going, and two cities for the time being, 2 cities in the Basque Country. We don't know what's going to happen. So the regions could reduce at 5 dwellings for each owner. And this, as Professor Nassar published and said many times, is very similar to the number that in other historical moments, the certain legislators or certain dictatorships used to qualify to say that someone is a less homeowner or not. So this reducing of at 5 it's not very clear and it's not very what should be. I mean, because I reported for the Valencia, the community of Valencia. Community of Valencia is also upset with that. I reported for that government in terms of expropriation of empty dwellings and in terms of the large homeowners because they are obsessed with that. And it's very difficult to explain to them because when legislators have that obsession, it's a fixed, it's a particular idea, and it's very difficult to explain that major reality is another thing. So, in that point, they are completely. So they are in a full mistake, considering that large homeowners are one of the actors of that problem. No, it's just another operator in the rental market system. And the last problem in Spain is the increase in dwelling sales. It's a side effect. So it's not the main effect, but I think that it's important to mention that 13% so the increasing of sales of dwellings unexpected is around 13% again of our data of the National Association of Housing Agents. And for sure, problems of gentrification and discrimination. If you would be interested in it, this year will be published in open access a treaty on the right to housing in the many of us we are participating in it, and many of the problems are analyzing in it. It would be a full treaty in one big book. So, which are the problems that apart from rent control effects and the effects mentioned in it, which are the range of measures that, in combination with rent control, because rent control for the time being is just a problem of Catalonia and 2 times in the Basque Country, but the problem is the combination of problematic instruments of bad tools to solve the access to housing in Spain. So the first, in my book, I explain more than this, but probably the most important are that. The first one, the possibility for the regions to reduce the consideration of a homeowner to 5 dwellings in ownership. Rent control in zoning areas versus rent freeze and compulsory extension of the Spanish Housing Act 1964. I'm going to mention this more deeply. So, in the previous system, which is also in force, which is also in force for urban leases concluded before 1985. In that for that contracts are a completely rent freeze and a compulsory extension. This is very similar to the 14 years that could be up to our current regulation, according to the amendments in the Spanish Urban Leases Act with respect to the Spanish Housing Act. And so it has very similarities. Very quickly, because I'm not going to preach the time provided for. There are 2 rulings of the Spanish Constitutional Court in this regard. The first one is not the most important one. I'm going to focus on the second one. The second one of January this year considered that a rent control is completely proportional and that they doesn't break the content of the property right. And but in 2022, similar for the reasons as in German, considered that according to the regulatory powers between the state and the regions, Catalonia has enough in 2022, so before the Spanish Housing Act had enough regulatory powers in the regard. And now has also considered that is completely unconstitutional, so not according to Spanish law and to the Constitution, the requirements to go to the court and to provide for an eviction in case of vulnerable people. The Spanish legislature decided to convert into a gincana the process of taking into a court. So I'm going to refer like that because it was like that. And they prefer just to make certain obstacles and certain problems in terms of taking to the court for eviction procedures, but just for large homeowners, not the rest. So, and for sure it was unconstitutional. Just very quick remarks. The first one, every rent or Spanish Act on housing correlates with the rent increase and supply decrease. Professor Nazarre informs that to the Spanish Parliament, and they didn't understand nothing on that, as they told him, no, do you think that is in terms of correlation or causation? No, it's correlation, but they didn't understand, as then he could mention before. Then economic rent and an economic rent increase and duration, contract compulsory extension is useless. The current rent control in Catalonia is constitutional, as I mentioned, but is useless, doesn't contribute to solve that problem. Current regulation has similarities with the former Spanish law released in 1964. And if you have more interest in that, I published 2 papers in the legal history review in this regard. In conclusion, science proves that both rent control and large homeowners are a legislative obsession. Thanks so much.